Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have all the stuff up now. We're going to have preview stuff, etc. So look for that on ESPN.com. And don't forget, the John Keim Report is presented by AAA. And also, don't forget my friends over at Chubby's. $10, folks. You get $10 off. Go to chubbysshorts.com. You can buy this shirt. You know you want it if you're a Commanders fanatic. They also have, listen, man, they have mesh shorts. They have Commanders swim trunks. Yes, they do. And hey, listen, you need that, right? Who doesn't need that? So anyways, chubbysshorts.com/Keim, get $10 off. All right. So today I'm going to be joined by former Washington Redskins tight end Logan Paulsen, of course, now an analyst with the team. You can find him all over the place. He's now on Twitter. Check him out there. He's got all sorts. He still has a Take Command podcast, even though Craig Hoffman is no longer there. All sorts of things with the team. But he's also, obviously, as you know, one of the smartest guys that I've ever covered, and why I like to have him on. And it makes you guys smarter. It makes me smarter. Before we get to that, just a couple things. I will be doing another. I do a couple more podcasts throughout the week. I'll do one Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Do the Friday will be Wednesday. Going to be kind of analyzing the roster going into the season, how I see each position group. Thursday, just kind of checking in from the locker room on Wednesday. Friday is going to be 5 things I learned throughout the week, and it could be about the Giants. It's going to be about the team. It could be about the game, the way things might go, etc. So that'll be on Friday. And then, of course, after the game, I'll be doing I'll have the podcast out a couple hours after the game. So that's the schedule for the week. And then Bram Weinstein and I, the voice of the Commanders, will be doing our live stream show starting the Tuesday after that first game. Or actually, you know what? Because it's a Green Bay game, I think it is that Tuesday night. So it'll kind of be a wrap up of the opener, but also a look ahead to that Green Bay game in week 2. So that's going to be a fun time. So anyway, that's the plan. Just wanted to make sure you knew that. And then for you gold members, I'll be doing the private Zoom. Still have to set that date. Most likely, I'd say 90% chance on Friday, but I will for sure on Wednesday tell you the time of that, and we'll post a link in the members community. So there you go. That's all you need to know. Here's my conversation with former Washington tight end Logan Paulsen. All right, Logan, always enjoyable and always fun having you on. So we're looking at the 2025 season. They're coming off a great magical year. How hard is it to follow up with another good year? Like, you've been part of teams that have gone both ways. Like, how hard is that? What is it that they're facing the biggest challenge in duplicate or building off that kind of a year?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And what I would say is that for people who haven't been in the NFL and haven't been in like the foxhole, haven't been kind of prepping each week, people don't understand how hard it is to win games in the NFL. So last season was extremely, magical. That was really difficult. It's just so hard to kind of get that same level of consistency year on year. I think you see it, in some statistics, like there hasn't been a division winner, of the same team for the last 21 years here. So it's very, very challenging. It's hard to kind of get the mental stuff worked up. I think it's also hard to be objective and kind of say, these are the areas that I need to improve on. Even though last year went really well, it's hard to be like, these are the areas we can be better at. So I think it's really, really challenging. And again, like, no matter how hard you work, no matter how hard you try, there's things that are outside of your control that affect that too. So yes, it's hard to articulate how difficult it is to be successful in the NFL for one game, for two games, for a season. And so to do it 2 years in a row is extremely challenging.
And obviously good teams do it. And so you
Yeah.
can, but it is challenging. Are there, do you look for signs at training camp? Did you see signs sometimes one way or another? And can you sometimes look for too many signs and over analyze some of those situations to see like, oh, what does it mean going forward?
Yeah, I think with training camp, it's always hard. And I always try to kind of make sure that I'm not making too big of an assertion or an assessment based on training camp. Obviously, training camp is a good data points, but ultimately, you're playing the same team, and it's kind of like, well, where's the roster at? It's really hard to kind of get those kind of measuring sticks. Use the joint practices, use the preseason. But I've said this before, I don't think you really know the team until probably week 3 or 4 of the season when you see them face some adversity. And I don't think the coaches really know. And I know that sounds crazy, but
No.
you don't really know, like, hey, we're really actually good at this, and we're really better at these types of runs, and are actually this coverage in this situation is better for us and better for our personnel right now. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything definitively you can say. I think the one thing that is the consistent variable in teams that are good is they have a good quarterback. And so to me, Jaden Daniels looked good in training camp
Right,
and
right.
he looks like a player. So I think those things are that's kind of the number one variable that I took away from camp is Jaden Daniels still looks very good. Cliff Kingsbury still looks like he knows how to call a game. Joe Wood Jr. looks like he's going to be more aggressive. I think all those things are positive, but you don't know how it's going to come together until week one.
Well, I think the Jaden factor is always a factor because you can look at the roster and say, well, are they strong here, here, or here? I said, but they have five. And five, as everybody says, makes a lot of wrongs right. So there is that. But even like from a mindset, is that a thing? Like, can you tell the way a team works, the way they approach it? Like, hey, and I heard from a lot of guys that saying like, I don't want to talk about last year. Like, I take that as a
Yeah.
good sign. Like that hasn't always been the case here.
I think that is a good sign. I think because Dan does such a good job of kind of saying, "Hey, we're last year's done. We're working on what the next thing is, the next opportunity." And he does such a good job of being where his feet is. Like it's today. It's like, can we get better at today's practice? So I think there's a lot of value to that, and I think that's honestly the only way, only consistent way, again, to get that done. You want your long-term goals, but you have to be process driven, and Dan does a great job of doing that. And so you say, like, can I identify day to day based on what I've seen at practice whether this team's going to be good? I can't. And if anybody tells you they can, I think they're kind of full of crap. I think you can
Right.
kind of tell that there are certain elements that are good. Like I like what the way the secondary looked. I like the way the pass rush looked. I like the way the offensive line's coming together. I like the depth of the offensive line.
Mhm.
But how does that happen on game day, right? There's guys that are going to be playing new roles. Like you look at Trey Amos, I think that's a really good example. Like he's been outstanding, definitely the player of the offseason for most people. But how does he handle going up against a higher ilk of wide receiver? Like what does he look against Malik Neighbors or AJ Brown or CD Lamb or George Pickens? Like those are questions that have yet to be answered. And I think he'll do fine. I think he'll hold his own. But like as you know, you've covered enough ball. Like you don't know until you see the matchup.
Right.
How, on paper, they've gotten better at stopping the run. Does that actually happen? They've got better in terms of rushing the passer because they can be more aggressive in coverage. Does that actually happen? Their offensive line is improved. Does it galvanize in the right way? We've talked about this off air quite a bit. Does the offensive line galvanize in a way where you see the benefit of the more talented group? So to me, it's yes, there are things that you want to say, oh, like they did this thing, they did this one thing, it looks really good, and they did a great job. But I'm always going to reserve judgment until I see it on game day and I see the plan come together. Do I think they're handling the process correctly? Yes. But as you know, because again, you've covered a lot of ball, the process, even though you're handling it the right way, doesn't always lead to results. And I think when you look back at the old Hard Knocks with Dan Campbell and the Lions, and you see how process driven they are, eventually it pays off, but it
Correct.
might not be this year. So I think
Right.
like ultimately I'm excited for this year. I think there's a lot of things that have improved from a personnel standpoint. It's just about how like that magical mythical thing of how a team comes together. Does it happen in the right way? And do you kind of catch lightning in a bottle? Because as much as people want to talk about being good, there's also a little bit of serendipity and a little bit of luck, which is so hard to quantify in your analysis.
Well, and also like sometimes that process is helped by are you healthy or not? I mean, that's a big
Yes.
part of it too, for sure. And then who are if you get injuries, what are they key injuries or are they just like, is it depth? What is it? And so, and then, or it's like guy drops a ball on fourth down and it just changes the game, which could lead you to 9-8 instead of 10-7 and maybe making or missing the playoffs. So it's really, that's why it's so tough. And like when these teams are, it's funny because you talk about like, well, this team, sometimes I'd have like my son was a big Browns fan and he was like years ago, it's like, well, they were in a lot of close games, but they lost. I said, yeah, but they lost. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't mean because like most games are close. That's the point. So,
Uh-huh.
what do you do to get over that? And so that's why it's so hard in this league to win.
And I think to that point, like you watch that fourth preseason game against Baltimore, which I'm sure a lot of fans want to forget. But when you watch it, you see some of the statistical variance that can pop up in a game. Like think about the fourth down conversions missed in that game, how it
Hmm.
creates short fields for the
Hmm.
defense, how it lets Baltimore's offense stay conservative and be more productive. And again, they had the highest, fourth down conversion percentage that I can remember in a long time. And when you look at that and you say, well, what if that regresses to 50%? Like what happens? And you're hoping that you're a little bit better on defense and it's able to offset some of that stuff. But that's where there's a little bit of serendipity, a little bit of luck. I think back to the first Dallas Cowboys game, and there was a 3rd and 4. and or 3rd and 7. And Jane Daniels throws a slant to Noah Brown, and he kind of it would have been a tough catch, but it's one that he's made, and he drops it. You end up going for a field goal. You miss the field goal. It's 0-0. You lose all that inertia. You lose all that momentum, and the game is compiled of moments like that
Mhm.
where you prep and you prep and you prep and you hope you're kind of tipping that luck scale in your favor, but ultimately things happen. Guy drops the ball, you miss the field goal, and all of a sudden you're in a game that you should be winning and you're not.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. So the other thing too is with the offensive line. Like I like what they've done there. I think a lot of people, it's hard not to. And I'm a really like how Josh Connolly developed this summer. But the question I always have is, okay, I think it's going to be good, but when?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because it's the offensive line, probably in a similar way to secondary, is one of those position groups that requires a lot. It requires five people to see the same thing,
Mhm.
to see a varied picture exactly the same way. And I love that description of offensive line play. And so, how do you get that? You got to spend a lot of time on task, got to get a lot of reps together. And I think that's been one of the things that I think they've survived well this offseason because they have great depth, but that starting group has not been out there together, and
Right,
that's outside of everybody's control. Brandon
right.
Coleman's got whatever he's got going on. Connerly kind of working his way up. Wiley Cosme's injured, so you're kind of moving all these pieces around. And again, you don't feel it because Allegretti and Wiley and Chris Paul have done such a great job. But when that first five gets out there, how many reps have Laramie Tunsil, Brandon Coleman, and Biotish had together on that left side?
Right.
Now, as an optimist, I'm saying, okay, well, Laramie Tunsil's seen about everything, and Tyler Biotish has seen a lot, so they should be able to get it communicated and get it figured out. But still, that's a variable that's unknown that could have maybe been mitigated had they spent more reps together, right?
Right.
I'm very confident that Andrew Wiley will see and play with a great confidence of a guy that's got a ton of experience. But he's going to be playing next to Connerly potentially. He's a new, younger player. How does he help insulate that? And I'm pretty confident he should be able to help. But again, getting those reps together is so important for that group. And Coach Johnson does a great job getting those guys ready. They played really, really well last year. Cliff does a
Yep.
great job of calling games to insulate that group. But I think it's one of those things where I mentioned week 4. Like
Mhm.
after 3, 4, 5 games, how do they start looking? How do they start to gel? I think that's going to be a really big story to keep an eye on because of the injury issues during training camp.
And I think it's going to be one that second half of the year, I'm looking for a lot of good stuff because Cosme comes back. You get a few games under his belt, and then the second half of the year is when they should be playing their best ball on paper.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And it's like with anything, the offensive line specifically, we just talked about, the more reps you get together, the more looks you see. And also for the coaches, like what is this group actually good at? And I think you have an idea of what they should be good at. With how athletic they are, you're like, oh, we should be running a lot of perimeter runs. We should be running a lot of screens. But maybe they're better at gap scheme runs. Maybe they're better at counter. Maybe they're better at power. Maybe they're better at whatever the run is. Maybe zone read becomes a bigger
Mhm.
feature of the offense. And kind of figuring that out on the fly is again, and it's not on the fly because they've done so much prep. These coaches have done so much prep getting ready for this, but sometimes things don't develop and matriculate the way you thought they were. So I think that again is why not only is it a gelling of the offensive line, but it's a true identification of the scheme that's going to be most effective for this group.
The other part too is getting Terry back. Now, obviously, I think we all knew at some point he's going to come back, but I'm just
Oh, is that
wondering,
a big deal, you think? I'm just kidding.
but at some point, like, because you're not, but you never know where it goes, or if he comes back, does he take the extension, or is he playing out his year? But just to get him back, what does it mean to a team? Not just it's physical, but it's also mental. Like, how much of a lift do you think just him coming back provides mentally?
Well, I think it's probably
Or just getting back
prob
on the field? Because again, they knew he was going to be back out there at some point, but when he does, like,
I think it's probably incalculable. Like, and what I mean by that is like when I was in Atlanta, Julio Jones was negotiating a
right,
contract my first year there, so 2017, and it felt kind of weird when you were out of practice because when he's out there, I got to see like the with without splits at real time. When he's out there, he's the thing that drives the offense. He's the thing that dictates coverage. He's the thing that means that we get these favorable run looks because no one wants to play an 8-man box versus Julio Jones. They need to play over the top safety help. And so when you're kind of going through training camp in that context, you're like, man, are we a bad offense? Like we can't do anything versus our defense. Like they're really putting it to us. And then all of a sudden, Julio gets back out there and you're like, oh, actually everything's totally fine. Like we've got this guy who can make vertical plays down the field. We've got the box structures we're looking for, and now we can make those plays. And obviously Terry and Julio are different players, but I do think having your kind of ace in the hole. Like I remember I went back and I just recently last week and we did a breakdown on command center for Terry and watching all of his explosive plays. And, is he the most nuanced route runner? Is he going to route you up like IG style in terms of double sticks and crazy moves? No, but what does he provide? An explosive element to this offense. And he does run go routes with extreme nuance. And the nuance he provides on the vertical route stem of a go applies to a dig, applies to a comeback. And that's one of the reasons why he's so effective at those routes. And I think about the teeth that he brought, like even on little RPOs, like he has I don't think it's a touchdown, but it's like a 70-yard gain versus the Pittsburgh Steelers on a little slant. He's got the RPO versus the Detroit Lions, which everyone remembers. He's got the touchdown versus Philadelphia on a slant route. That just brings you alive in a way, and it gives your offense some potency that's really nice. So not only getting him back, I think, is extremely critical, but getting Noah Brown back on the field. All of a sudden,
Huge,
you've got two
both of them.
guys that
Yeah.
are good perimeter, in Kerry's case, like good to very good, and Noah's case, good perimeter players. Now all of a sudden the Debo acquisition feels so much different. So I think it's probably just a huge relief for the offense, a huge relief for the offensive coaches to get a player like that back in the fold because he gives the offense some sharpness, some teeth, and makes them kind of dangerous again and takes some of the pressure off Jaden Daniels.
And it's funny because I'd hear from some people like you watching practice, like, oh, there's just not as much energy as last year. Well, my point was always, first of all, I think there is on defense, but secondly, I think that energy comes from big plays on offense and making throws down the field like we saw last summer with Terry. That was missing this summer. So like that to me was it wasn't that there was energy missing, it was that the guy who provides a lot of it was both of them, but especially Terry was missing. That
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think the one thing about this offense, when you're kind of going through your base installs, is one of the things they really like to do is when you get a favorable matchup, press man situation, it's isolated basketball, take it. And when you don't have a player at that position, and I'm speaking as a player who couldn't do this, just to be fair to the guys that were in training camp this year, when you have a player who can win in man-to-man coverage down the field, like that hits different. It changes the complexion of what the defense is going to do. You're not going to be as aggressive on 3rd and 5 because Terry could beat you over the top. And I think you felt that in practice, and it gave the defense a lot of confidence. And those guys played absolutely outstanding. So I'm not detracting from them, but I do think bringing him back, again, gives you some teeth, gives you some firepower, makes you more explosive. And again, that shows up in the statistical data when you look at his catches from last year.
And I'm also curious now, and you touched on it, but like the impact of those two, Terry and Noah outside, and they seem to do a good job in practice of getting Debo situations where it's like a one-on-one, do you make the tackle or not? And sometimes it's at an angle for a D-back, which is going to be tough because that dude, like he's built. I mean, he's a bigger
Yeah.
receiver. He's not, I don't see him as overweight. I think he's just big.
Yeah, he's just a naturally thicker dude, And I
Yes.
think, I was talking to Dan Quinn about it the other day for the game plan, and one of the things he said was it's there are certain times when you're in the NFL, you're around all these tremendous athletes all the time. Think about, think I was the best athlete at my high school, and I was like the worst athlete in the NFL, right? And you go through the list, and you're just around a bunch of guys who are tremendously athletic. Every once in a while, you meet somebody or you come across a guy that's special. Think about like your Julio Jones, your Trent Williams, your Hopkins down in Houston. Like when I played with them, I was like, these guys just move and are built with a different kind of physicality. London Fletcher's another great example of that, right? The way he moved, the explosiveness he had. And I think Debo brings a little bit of that. Like in this land of freak athletes, he's a freak athlete. Like his strength, his power, his speed, his ability to change direction. Like when you watch it on film, it jumps out at you. Kind of like when you go to like a high school game or there's that kid that's getting recruited to play D1 and no one can tackle him, no one can touch him. It's just like that dude's different. And I feel like that's what you get from Debo. So I think Cliff is going to do a great job. I've said this before of providing him with one-on-one opportunities in space. And when you look at his most productive career year of his career, that's what Kyle did at the highest level I've ever seen him do it. Right? We're going to find opportunities to get him the football in space, separated from other people with blockers ahead of him, and he's going to make us right. And so talk about increasing offensive efficiency. And again, Noah Brown. Terry McLaurin allow you to do that because what do they do? Not only is Noah Brown a tremendous blocker, and Terry he'll put his face in there when he wants to, but
Right.
the ability to create vertical space increases zone widths you have to defend, and as a result, makes it harder for guys to create tackles to make tackles in open space. And who's going to maximize on that? Debo Samuel.
But by the way, speaking of Noah Brown, like they would bring him on occasion as a pulling blocker.
Yeah,
They did that with Diami a couple of times. Like that's different. Like you don't see a lot of receivers doing that. So that's what I mean.
I think you see a lot of inspiration on some of those plays from what they're doing or what they did do in LA with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And it's crazy because you get the personnel you want, you get nickel on the field, and then you say, I think Noah Brown can beat up on this nickel player. I can and lead up on him like a fullback. And it's a really creative, innovative way to
Yeah.
manipulate defensive personnel. If you got a guy that can block like that.
And that's why too, like when people ask about the running game, it definitely feels like a running back by committee situation because I think there's something they each do well, but you're not going to take touches away from. You want Debo to get some carries. You want Jaden's going to be part of that. Austin does his things well. Like, I get asked a lot. I don't think there's going to be a bell cow guy here.
Yeah, I don't think so, at least for right now. I mean,
Right.
obviously
Unless
things
somebody
could.
gets hot and just takes it.
Yeah, unless someone gets hot and takes it, and that could be anybody. But I do
Right.
think it's going to be very game plan dependent, type of run dependent. How are we starting this game? What do we want to be this game?
Right.
And so I think it's great that they've cultivated a running back room where you can do that, and it's going to be exciting to watch.
What would be, the biggest concern going into the season for you?
I think I've talked to you about this before. Like the highest of levels. I've mentioned this a bunch of times. Is just the areas that are going to just naturally statistically regress. And so,
Right.
like, what I mean by that is like, right on. There's some things that were like Commanders last year. If you think about that bell curve, they were operating so far outside the bell curve and it led to these crazy offensive efficiency numbers, right? I mentioned the fourth down, Jaden's completion percentage, wins in close games. Like there is going to be some regression there. Now, the way you stave off regression is you get better on first and second down. How do you do that? You bring in offensive linemen. How do you get better on first, second down of defense? You get better up front. You get better in the secondary, which I think they've done all those things. It's just have they done enough to
Right.
totally stave that off? Now, if you come down a couple levels, I think the thing that comes to me is really like depth on the perimeter corner spot. I think it's good, but I think there's a little bit of a drop off if Lattimore or Trey Amos gets hurt, and then a little bit of the offensive line continuity. I think those two things are things that I've kind of flagged in my mind as like if there's a big injury in the secondary, that's going to be tough in terms of getting back to kind of that. Getting better on first, second down, affecting some of that statistical regression, and then offensive line continuity, like we talked about earlier in the show.
And to the point about the corners, like I think I like their depth, but Igbenogany, Mikey Samuel, and then Jonathan Jones are all better suited, all better have played better inside. They
Right.
can play outside, but having those guys like Lattimore and Amos, like Joe Witt is salivating over what they can do in press man because that is what he wants to play. He has made that very clear.
Yeah, and I think that's more what I'm talking about. Because like,
Yeah.
do I think Jonathan Jones is good? Igbenogany, yes. Do I think Mike Sanders still can play in the perimeter? Yeah, but like you said, I think they're better
Right, right.
interior players, right? And I think when you look at Trey Amos and Marshawn Lattimore, they look like a different species of human
Yeah,
being than the guys we just
yeah,
talked about. They're tall, they're long, they're very fluid in their movement, and the other guys are a little bit more sawed off. They look like more traditional nickel players, and
correct.
so not that they can't play outside, it's just genetically it feels like they're more suited to that position. So that's why that is concerning to me a little bit.
What'd you think about Lattimore? Because like it's hard, and I would always say like it was hard to get a full read on them because this is where it would have been nice to have McLaurin in camp to see them go one on one with
Sure.
him. But also like he seems to be moving well. He's still on the field. He's not coming out of practices. That to me was a good sign. But you know, he talked about having Rustin's game. What did you see, and what would you see?
Yeah, so I think the thing that stuck out to me about him is I felt like he was much more confident in
Yes.
his technique, in his physicality, and in how he was seeing the field. And probably that comes from second year, quote unquote, year and a half in the system. And so I remember a couple reps where he's definitively, decisively making a break on the ball. He's shooting his hands with great strength. He's taken that great, Fred calls it like that gather step or that kick
Yes.
step at the line of scrimmage and staying square with the wide receiver. And not that he wasn't doing that stuff last year. I felt like last year he was trying to survive as opposed to thrive because he's learning a bunch of new stuff and having gone to places where they're asking you to do different things like in my career, it can be very, very unsettling mentally. And so you kind of go back to old habits, maybe bad habits. And I felt like he looked healthy. He's looking more confident in the system. And I really left training camp thinking like, wow, maybe like the obituary on Marshawn Lattimore in his career last year was written way too early because he looked in great shape. He looked like he was playing with great confidence, and he looked like the player, quite frankly, that was playing well in New Orleans a couple of years ago. So, for whatever reason, this strength staff has done a great job of helping these players with kind of marred injury history, kind of figuring it out. And this might be another case study, another feather in that group's hat for finding ways to get good players healthy and get them back to what they were before.
And that's a good point. And I will say on him, the best thing I can say is you're not pointing out like, oh my gosh, he looked bad.
Yeah,
He was
yeah,
talking about that. Like there wasn't a lot of chatter about him, which is a good thing because now again, like you're not facing the top guy. Debo's a different kind of receiver. They're covering him, but they're different guys. But it's the way he moved. If you would, because I'll say this, like if he didn't look good there, it'd have been noticed.
yeah.
And nobody was talking about him, which to me was a good thing. And I also wonder, Logan, too, like he told me like he had 3 years of injuries and he knows that he had not been on the field. It's right there, you know it. But he said that, it felt like he needed to get his technique back, which was his footwork. And so you can fall into bad habits when you're hurt a lot. And then you've got to get back to where the good habits return.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, who was that corner that Ron brought in a couple years ago that was like the man guy that they had playing
William
zone?
Jackson.
Yeah, William Jackson. Like from day one, you were kind of like, oh, like it doesn't look right. He looks
Oh,
really uncomfortable. And this training camp, I think Marshawn looked like the antithesis of that. He looked
yeah,
confident, comfortable. And were there things that he was working through? Sure. And people say, oh, the number one receiver wasn't out there. I think that's a great point to bring up. But this is the test you're given. This is the
correct.
batter you got to strike out. If you didn't strike him out, it'd be alarming, right? If you didn't
Right.
pass that test, you'd be alarmed. So the fact that he handled all those opportunities so well, I think was again a testament to his process and where he's at the moment. And again, we talked about like where's the team at? What do we know? I'm only giving you the observation from camp. I think he looks like he's in good shape, and we'll see how he looks
Right.
as we get into games and real competition.
And it's always about durability, and we can't predict that. And I think to me, Logan, so if you're not seeing him against certain guys, like, well, how is he moving? And the big thing is driving on the ball. And sometimes you'd see him be a little bit ultra aggressive on it, but I'm like, but I like the way he drove on the ball. The aggressiveness you can start to like, you can wean or you can,
Yeah,
hone that. But like the driving on the ball to me was the big thing.
yeah, I think that's 100% right. And again, it's the driving on the football, it's the confident jam, it's the good footwork at the
Right.
line of or the better footwork at the line of scrimmage. I'm sure he would say he wants to be even better, which is why he's one of the, why he's a pro, why he's an NFL professional. So I think there's a lot of things to be positive about, and I'm hoping that, maybe he's not, the Pro Bowl player, but maybe he's 80% of that, and that'd be pretty good for this defense and what they want to be.
So now Trey Amos, he was wearing those grills out at practice. How many times did you wear your grills out at practice?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I was a big, wasn't a big grow guy, but I kind of like. This is gonna sound crazy. I like my corner to have the
Yes.
confidence to
Yeah.
do that, right?
Oh
Or like
yeah.
your number one receiver or whoever it is, like that ability to kind of be like, uh, and he's not super loud. He's not like
No.
very boisterous, but he's got a quiet confidence to him, and I think it shows up with stuff like that. Which again is like I sound like those scouts from Trouble with the Curve, where it's like he's got an ugly girlfriend or whatever, and that's why he's going to be good. But there's something about that that makes me feel confident in
No.
a cornerback.
I would agree with that for sure. Just a couple more things. What was maybe the best thing you saw this summer?
The best thing I saw this summer, it's got to be the defense, man. Like specifically the secondary. Like they were such a drastic improvement from last year to this year in terms of confidence, in terms of understanding the scheme. Like Will Harris, I love that guy, man. I love the way he
Yeah,
competes. Like watching him go to war with Zach Ertz in that Burgundy
it's
and goal
fun.
scrimmage, I was like, this is
Yeah, it was
awesome. Like
fun.
if you like football, like Zach's giving everything he can handle, Will's giving Zach everything he can handle. At the end of every play, they're talking to each other. There's a PI here, there's a catch there, there's a PBU there. And I just like, we haven't had a safety that covers that way here in a
Right.
while, right? So think about what he can do for Joe Witt Jr., the way that Will Harris is playing the run, the Quan's maturation. Mike Sanderstill, man, I knew he was a tough, competitive guy, but every day in the system, I feel like he's getting more and more confident. And yeah, so it's got to be the secondary specifically, man. Those guys they really lit the world on fire. And like you said, they weren't playing against the number one guys, but they
They look
did it.
good.
They took it to another level there, man. They took it to another level, which was awesome to see.
Well, and to that point, like you brought up Will Harris, you brought up Summerstill. What I identify with that is bringing in the right guys.
Oh
There's a
yeah,
mindset there that you can. I remember there would be sometimes guys in the past like we want to be a smart, tough team. Like, well, then why did you draft a dumb guy who doesn't isn't physical? You know what I mean? Like seriously. And there's a couple players in particular I know I'm talking about, but but that's what would happen. Here they say this is who we want, and then you see, oh, this is who you got.
yeah, and I,
Makes a
I think
difference.
like that's a testament to Adam Peters. Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and their relationship, and Adam's understanding of who they want to be offensively and defensively, and what they want to do. I think you see it with the addition of Laramie Tunsil, the drafting of Josh Connerly, the addition of Will Harris, the signing of Dietrich Wise. Like those were not necessarily everybody's number one free agent signing guys, right? You know, obviously Laramie Tunsil was, but some of those other guys are kind of down the
Right.
line free agents, but they fit what I think Joe Witt Jr. wants to do, what Cliff wanted to do in terms of improving the offense. So I think it really is a testament to the front office and their clear understanding of the football side of it. Because again, I played for teams where it's like, why'd we bring that guy in? Like we play a
Yeah.
3-4 and he's a four down defensive end. He doesn't fit here.
Right.
But they really understand the X's and O's of it, which is a very unique thing for front offices.
And I think the mindset as well. So the last thing is Santana Moss being honored, going to the Ring of
Oh
Fame, and
yeah.
all that. Like he's all like I would always tell him that he was as professional as they come, like good or bad, win or lose, whatever. His voice, he treated people the same every single time. The interviews were always the same. They were great. He didn't back down, but I always really respected the hell out of that guy. I'm just as a player, your thoughts on Santana?
I mean, I kind of feel the same way. Like he was one of my favorite players when I got into the league, and so it
Mm.
was cool to be in the same locker room with him. And then you kind of have this expectation of what, premium players in the NFL are going to be like. They're going to be divas. They're going to not talk to you. They're going to be this larger than life character. And there's a little bit of that aura around Tana, but he doesn't treat you any differently. He
No,
treats
yeah,
you like, hey, Logan, what's up, man? Hey, what's up, LP? Like, and that was when I played. And now getting to work with him every day, you see the quality human being he is, and you get to see the professionalism he approached every day with. And it really this award couldn't be going to a better
yeah,
person. I think that's the cool thing about Tana. He's just a good
yeah.
person, and again, excellent player. But I think the person is something that really should be celebrated.
I think that's fantastic. But yeah, I always appreciate that. I also always would look at him like, dude, you're like just a little bit taller than me and you weigh about 20 pounds more. How the hell are you doing? You know what I mean? Like
He's
I marvel at guys of his size who do what he did and have, without fear.
I still have memories of him in practice. Like, you can you see, we just talked about it with Debo, like how someone just built a little bit differently. Santana's a great example of that. I remember him running routes and just the way he could put his feet in the ground, how he could stop and burst out of his cuts at
Yes.
this incredibly high level. And it was like, I remember watching the film with Kyle and Sean and then being like in awe. And like when you see people like that, people with that football mentality that have, uh, been around the game for so long in awe of his skill set. It speaks to how good Tana was and how maybe like I think about him in today's NFL and how dominant he would be because they could move him around, hide him. He could play in the slot, he could play on the perimeter. Like he'd be a surefire Hall of Famer.
Oh yeah.
So just born a couple years too early, basically. But still, for him to be as dominant and as effective as he was, like he's what is he? He's 5'10", maybe 5'9", playing X receiver in
Yes.
offenses and still being a dominant player. Like it's unbelievable to think about his career arc and what it could have been, but still tremendous and again like just a physical freak.
I also asked him like what he thought it would have been like to play with a guy like Jaden because he was switching quarterbacks all the time too.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I really loved covering him and have loved staying in touch with him over the years and seeing him out there, just like with you. So, but yeah, seriously, like just the people you learn from that you respect a ton for their professionalism. It's just fun to see what you guys are now doing. So, and by the way, so you still have the Take Command podcast. I want to plug that, even though you chased Craig Hoffman off there, so you can finally get a word in edgewise.
Yeah.
But just so people know you're still doing that. What else do you anything else you want to plug?
Still doing that. Logan Paulsen NFL is my Twitter now. I've
That's
gone over
right.
the
Oh
dark
my God, I
side.
forgot to mention that. I'll mention that when you're
Logan Paulsen 82 is my Instagram. And then make sure you check out all the Command Center stuff. I'm going to do an exclusive film breakdown show this year, which will be about 15 minutes long of stuff that I find interesting about the upcoming opponent. We got the show with Dan Quinn. We got the Command Center show. We got the Command Center pod. I'm doing booth review this year with London and Bram, which is like their immediate reaction to the game, which has been so much fun to be a part of that because those guys are so uber talented and so uber smart. So lots of stuff, lots of great content. So if you check out the Commanders YouTube basically to catch all that stuff.
awesome. Thanks, Logan.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Logan for joining me, and thank you as always for tuning in. I'll be back on Wednesday with another episode, so I'll talk to you next time.